So hello there. This video is all about establishing remote development for your Raspberry Pi. So if you're like me, using Raspberry Pi as a project for just basically coding it. So remote development is different. Is definitely useful for you, so as to not connect a monitor, keyboard, just to code the Raspberry Pi. So remote development is definitely useful and easy. So, with that said, it is first considered that you have enabled SSH to your Raspberry Pi. So you gotta make sure that thing is already enabled. You enabled SSH communication, and also the Raspberry Pi is connected to your local network or to the Wi-Fi. So let's head on. So there are different applications or programs that uh, can be done for remote development using SSH for Raspberry Pi. The first thing that I introduced to you is the PuTTY. So PuTTY is really it's a handy one. It's a handy application. It's pretty much lightweight, uh, although it's very flexible. In this case, we will need to select the SSH connection type and port 22. So again, you gotta make sure that your Raspberry Pi has already enabled SSH and it is connected to the Wi-Fi, your local network. So what you it's this establishing SSH communication using PuTTY is pretty much straightforward. Of course, the first thing that you need to know is the IP address of your Raspberry Pi, but the Raspberry Pi makes it easy for us. It has this shortcut key for the key name for its IP address to identify its IP address. Just type in Raspberry Pi dot local. Then you could actually save this session if you wanna say rpi save session. So that you no longer need to enter the host name, the port 22. This is actually the most tedious task in PuTTY. So you gotta make sure to save the session. So click save, and if that's oh sorry, I accidentally click it. So here, so this is the terminal of the Raspberry Pi. So if you see this or there's no error at all, it just says that you have established connection to your Raspberry Pi. So before we proceed, the Raspberry Pi you need to enter some credentials for it. The default username for it is Pi if you haven't configured it, and the default password is Raspberry. So just type that on that one. So again, the default is Pi. Default username is Pi, and the default password is Raspberry. Click enter, then you are authorized to enter here in its terminal. Let me just expand it a bit. So there, you have established an remote development for your Raspberry Pi. You could very well code in here if you want to. Let's say we'll use Nano. So let's head on to documents first, where I store my code. Let's say you wanna, the ever trusted Hello World program, Nano. Let's say we wanna name it Hello World.py. There, I've actually had a program of it before, so let's just make another one so that Nano Hello World 1.py. So there you go. It's just Nano is actually a text line command editor, so it's pretty much straightforward and pretty easy to use. So you can very well code in here. Let's say, yeah, again, print uh, hello world. So let's save that one by Control X. Then click Y, click Enter. So let's say if you wanna run that program or that Python script, you gotta make sure to enter the Python 3 if you're using Python 3, and the default is actually Python. So you want to make sure to use the updated, like the Python 3 version. So hello world. .py. So there you go, hello world. So the next method you wanna use is uh, VNC. Although PuTTY is really a good a way of communicating with your Raspberry Pi, but if you wanna view it the OS, the Raspbian is it, you wanna install VNC Viewer. So basically, it's again uses SSH communication, and yeah, it basically displays what is being displayed in Raspberry Pi, its operating system. So if you haven't have logged in the Raspberry Pi, same thing, just enter Raspberry Pi.local, and first it will ask for the credentials, of course, the username and the password. Then once done entering those credentials, you are good to go. Then you are redirected to this uh, viewer. Again, if you want this one, it's actually the Raspbian. So yeah, the GUI you can very well code in here as well, but yeah, and access the folders using the GUI, of course. So yeah, let's try to code in here. I prefer Thony. One thing about this one though is I guess in my case it's pretty much laggy because it takes so much bandwidth. Oh yeah, takes bandwidth because of the graphical user interface. And yeah, I have here my other program. Let's try again. Hello world. Click run. Oh, you gotta make sure to save this one first. Yeah, say test. And click OK. Click run. Yeah, click run. There it is. So if you want to use this one, you could very well use it. I guess the Raspbian has offered different IDEs, the Genie and the Thony Python IDE. So this is also good if you like wanna view the camera. I actually use VNC not very often because yeah, again it it takes so much bandwidth, and of course you're basically streaming from your Raspberry Pi, and I only use it to access the camera. I actually worked on a project that uses camera, and uh, by default, if you just installed VNC Viewer, it's not actually configured. I mean, there will be no display at all to your window. So to make sure that you want to view the camera of the Raspberry Pi here in the VNC, you gotta click here, this logo of the VNC, and click on this hamburger options, then go on with the options, then go on here in troubleshooting and enable direct capture mode. So this will allow the VNC viewer to view the camera view in this case. So well, then that's for the VNC viewer. Again, I don't really recommend it if you wanna really just develop code. Uh, it takes so much bandwidth, and yeah, it's as you can see, it's, you know, it's really not pleasant to code at all here using VNC viewer. And lastly, obviously my favorite one is the Visual Studio Code. So there's a lot of IDE out there that you want to use. I just prefer Visual Studio Code because it's really flexible, and it has uh, a lot of extensions to use. So this is actually what makes Visual Studio Code flexible, because it has a lot of extensions that you can install and use. So if you wanna establish remote development here in Visual Studio Code. You gotta first install these extensions here, right here. The remote first you install this remote development extension. This actually is a package, so if you install this one, these extension as well will be installed, and uh, yeah, remote SSH as well. Here, this is a separate extension. You gotta install remote SSH editing configuration files. Click install, and this one, remote development, and pretty much you're good to go. Uh, so after installing this extension, you will see a new icon right here. This one, and also at the top left, this one. So you could click this one and connect to a host. So as you can see right here, I've already like registered the Raspberry Pi local. But if you haven't registered it first, you just type on Raspberry Pi local. So let's click on this one. It should pop up another window establishing SSH communication to the Raspberry Pi. So So it may take a while to re-establish communication, and as well as still a lot of background things that being set up. So you will be prompted to enter the password for your Raspberry Pi. So again, the default one is Raspberry, but I have already configured and changed my password. So after entering the password, it should load all the program directory of my Raspberry Pi. As you can see, there's also the device that you are connected to displayed in here. So let me just, speed this. So yeah, let's click this Explorer. It should display, oh no, connected to remote. Let me just, so yeah, I actually forgot you need to click here, this icon, Remote Explorer, and this should uh, enlist here the target Raspberry Pi local. Just click this one and open it. So again, you need to enter your password. And I also forgot, of course, when you're working with Raspberry Pi, it is really dependent on Python language. So you gotta make sure as well that your system has the Python SDK. So add that add that in your path environment, and also install some extensions for it. So here, this Pylance and Python. Sorry, yeah, Pylance and Python is the one that you need to install so that there's auto completion and stuff when you code. So this is I generally do prefer coding here in Visual Studio Code. It's really easy, and you could also have, like, example, you have a GitHub repository. You could very well commit because it has also a source control extension here, the Visual Studio Code. And as you can see, we can access all the files of our Raspberry Pi. So yeah, and here I have actually loaded a program. Can very well code in here, and if you use like the GPIO 0, it has like auto completion and as well as a helper guide for the developers. So this is pretty handy because if you compare to like the Thony IDE in the Raspberry Pi, there's no helper or auto completion there. So I do recommend to develop some codes here. So I guess that's it. I do hope that you follow through and learn something. And you could actually run the terminal here in the Raspberry Pi. So let's say sudo apt-get update. Let's update our Raspberry Pi. There, as you can see, it can run the commands here. So I guess that's it. I I hope that you follow through and can very well set up remote development for your Raspberry Pi. Thank you.